In the frozen ruins of Stalingrad, a German soldier wrote his final letter home. "We will not leave here alive," he scrawled with frostbitten fingers. "The horses have been eaten. We would eat the dead if they weren't frozen solid." 250,000 men entered that city. Only 5,000 ever saw Germany again. This is the story of how Hitler lost the Second World War. Not through a single battle or mistake, but through a cascade of catastrophic decisions that turned inevitable victory into total annihilation. It's the story of a corporal who thought he could command armies, of factories that couldn't match American production, of oil fields that remained forever out of reach. Most of all, it's the story of how Hitler declared war on the three most powerful nations on Earth simultaneously and discovered too late that willpower cannot overcome mathematics. The numbers tell a brutal truth. By 1944, Germany was producing 1/5 the tanks of its enemies, 1/4 the aircraft. The United States alone possessed an economy twice the size of Germany's, and it doubled again during the war. Hitler challenged powers that controlled 80% of the world's industrial capacity. He believed racial superiority would triumph over material reality. He was wrong. September 1939. German panzers roll into Poland with devastating efficiency. The world watches in horror as Hitler's war machine shatters the Polish army in just over a month. France falls in 6 weeks. Yugoslavia in 11 days. It seems unstoppable. But behind the victories, a darker truth lurks. Germany enters this war with a gross domestic product of $351 billion. Respectable, formidable even, until you realize that Britain, France, and their empires possess a combined economy of 1.8 trillion, more than 5 times larger. Hitler dismisses the numbers. His generals dismiss the numbers. They've just conquered most of Europe, haven't they? Superior tactics, superior soldiers, superior willpower. These things matter more than factory output. For a while, they're right. From 1939 to early 1942, German forces achieved the impossible. They conquer territory from the Atlantic to the outskirts of Moscow. They fight outnumbered and win. Military skill dominates economic reality. But wars of conquest end. Wars of attrition begin. And in a war of attrition, mathematics becomes destiny. Germany's 68 million people face the Soviet Union's 167 million. America's 130 million. The British Empire's 700 million. Even mobilizing 42% of every German male, the highest percentage of any nation in the war, produces only 17.9 million soldiers. The Allies field over 60 million. By 1944, 2 out of every 3 soldiers on Earth wear Allied uniforms. They outnumber Axis forces 2-to-1 on every front. The Wehrmacht is drowning in a tide of humanity it cannot hope to match. June 22, 1941, 3:30 in the morning. 3.8 million German soldiers surge across an 1,800-mile front in the largest military operation in human history. Codename, Barbarossa. Objective, destroy the Soviet Union in 3 months. Hitler has calculated everything. The Red Army will collapse. Stalin's regime will crumble. The inferior Slavic race cannot withstand the German warrior. The first weeks seem to prove him right. Soviet units dissolve under the Blitzkrieg. Hundreds of thousands surrender. German spearheads race hundreds of miles into Soviet territory. Victory appears certain. Then reality intervenes. German intelligence expects to encounter perhaps 50 additional Soviet divisions during the campaign. By mid-August, 200 fresh divisions appear from nowhere. The Red Army isn't collapsing. It's reconstituting faster than Germany can destroy it. Worse, the distances are incomprehensible. German trucks break down on primitive roads. Supply lines stretch beyond breaking point, and winter approaches. In August, with Moscow just miles away, Hitler makes his first catastrophic error. His generals beg him to drive straight for the capital, take Moscow, shatter the Soviet nerve center, end the war. Hitler refuses. He wants Ukraine's resources. He wants Leningrad encircled. The panzers turn south while Moscow waits, undefended. By the time German forces refocus on Moscow in late November, they're exhausted, outnumbered, and wearing summer uniforms as Russian winter descends. December 5, 1941. German soldiers stand 12 miles from the Kremlin. Through their field glasses they can see Moscow's spires. So close. But they cannot advance another step. That same day, Siberian divisions, fresh, winter-equipped, ferocious, smash into the German lines. The Wehrmacht reels backward 100 miles. Germany has suffered 830,000 casualties, more than 25 times their losses in the entire 1940 Western campaign. The quick victory Hitler required has failed. The war of attrition that will destroy Germany has begun. 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Adolf Hitler stands before the Reichstag. He's about to make what historians will call the single greatest mistake of the war. He declares war on the United States. No one forced him to do this. The tripartite pact with Japan requires Germany to support Japan only if Japan is attacked. Japan attacked first. Hitler owes them nothing. But Hitler volunteers. He declares war on the world's largest economy, the greatest industrial power on Earth, a nation protected by 2 oceans that German forces cannot possibly cross. His Luftwaffe adjutant is astounded by Hitler's cluelessness about American potential. Hitler has prepared nothing, given Admiral Dönitz no warning to position submarines, made no calculations whatsoever. He simply believes Japan will distract America while Germany finishes off the Soviets. In England, Winston Churchill learns of Hitler's declaration. He later writes that he knew at that moment the war was won. The United States is in it now, up to the neck and into the death. American industrial might will prove decisive. Churchill understands what Hitler does not. In 1941, before Pearl Harbor, American factories already produce 47,000 aircraft under Lend-Lease. By 1944, they'll produce 96,000 in a single year, more than Japan builds during the entire war. The arsenal of democracy is now an active combatant. Germany's defeat has become mathematically inevitable. August 23, 1942. The first German soldiers enter Stalingrad. Stalin has ordered the city bearing his name held at all costs. Hitler has ordered it captured at all costs. What follows becomes hell on earth. For 5 months the battle rages block by block, house by house, room by room. The city dissolves into rubble, but neither side yields. Over 2 million casualties occur in the bloodiest battle in human history. The strategic error begins months earlier when Hitler orders Army Group South to capture both Stalingrad and the Caucasus oil fields simultaneously. This divides German forces dangerously, creates gaps, stretches supply lines to breaking. General Friedrich Paulus's 6th Army, 330,000 of Germany's finest troops, advances into urban combat while supplies dwindle. By mid-November, Soviet intelligence spots the weak point. Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian units protect the German flanks. Not bad soldiers, but not German soldiers. On November 19th, Soviet forces smash through these positions from both sides. 4 days later, the trap closes 60 miles west of Stalingrad. 250,000 German and Romanian troops are now encircled. Paulus requests permission to break out. Escape is still possible. His army can still be saved. Hitler's response seals their doom. Stand and fight, he orders. Not one step back. He promotes Paulus to field marshal, reminding him that no German officer of that rank has ever surrendered. He promises Luftwaffe supply convoys. They deliver a fraction of what's needed. Men starve in temperatures of minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Field Marshal von Manstein tries to break through. His relief force reaches within 30 miles of the pocket. But Hitler refuses to let Paulus fight westward to link up. The moment passes. February 2nd, 1943. Paulus surrenders with 91,000 survivors, walking skeletons, barely alive. Of these, only 5,000 to 6,000 ever return home. The last one's a full decade after the war ends. 250,000 German and Romanian dead are recovered from the ruins. Hitler doesn't give his traditional January 30th speech that year. Goebbels speaks instead. German radio plays Bruckner's somber 7th Symphony before announcing the catastrophe. The myth of Wehrmacht invincibility dies in those ruins. Germany never regained strategic initiative in the East. Hitler himself later blamed Stalingrad for Germany's impending demise. Germany lost more soldiers at Stalingrad than America lost in the entire war. German factory workers labor in shifts around the clock. They produce excellent tanks, magnificent aircraft, superior weapons in nearly every category. But they cannot produce enough of them. The numbers are devastating. From 1939 to 1945, the Allies produced 231,000 tanks. Germany produces 46,000, a 5-to-1 ratio. The Allies produce 400,000 combat aircraft. Germany produces 89,000, nearly 5-to-1 again. Naval vessels? 5-to-1. Steel production? The United States alone outproduces all Axis powers combined. German engineers designed the Tiger tank, 100mm armor, the legendary 88mm gun. It can destroy any Allied tank at ranges Allied tanks cannot effectively return fire. It's a masterpiece. Germany builds 1,350 of them during the entire war. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union churns out 84,000 T-34s. Not as sophisticated, not as powerful one-on-one. But when 5 T-34s surround every Tiger, sophistication doesn't matter. Stalin supposedly says it best, quantity has a quality all its own. The Americans take a different approach. The Sherman tank, adequate armor, adequate gun, excellent reliability, easy to maintain. America produces 49,000 of them, the second most produced tank of the war. Even this pales next to aircraft production. In 1944 alone, the United States produces 96,000 aircraft. That's more than Japan builds during the entire war. More than Germany produces in any year, even at peak production. President Roosevelt calls for 185,000 aircraft, 120,000 tanks, and 55,000 anti-aircraft guns in 2 years. Seems impossible. America exceeds every target. William Knudsen, director of the War Production Board, explains the victory simply. We won because we smothered the enemy in an avalanche of production, the like of which he had never seen nor dreamed possible. If any single resource decides this war, it's oil. Everything else, tanks, planes, trucks, ships, means nothing without fuel to move them. Germany enters the war with a 15 million barrel stockpile, inadequate for 6 months of mechanized warfare. It depends on Romanian imports, Soviet imports before 1941, and synthetic fuel plants that cost 3 times natural petroleum to operate. The United States produces 1.04 billion metric tons of crude oil from 1939 to 1945, 59% of total world production, 16 times what all Axis powers produce combined. America's oil advantage alone guarantees eventual victory. But Germany might have survived on synthetic fuel if left undisturbed. By 1943, synthetic plants produce 60% of Germany's aviation fuel. Not enough, but workable. Then May 1944 arrives. Allied bombers begin systematically targeting every synthetic fuel plant in Germany. The results are catastrophic. German oil production drops from 918,000 tons per month to 319,000 tons per month in just 6 months. A 65% decline. Synthetic fuel production decreases 90% by early 1945. The Luftwaffe is grounded. Pilots cannot train. Experienced aces sit idle while Allied bombers obliterate German cities because there's no fuel for their aircraft. Panzer divisions cannot maneuver. They sit motionless, conserving every drop of precious fuel, unable to respond to Allied attacks. By February 1945, Germany produces less than 0.5% of its 1944 aviation fuel levels. Albert Speer, Germany's armaments minister, calls the oil campaign the end of German armaments production. Hermann Göring calls it the utmost in deadliness. Fighter ace Adolf Galland identifies it as the most important of the combined factors which brought about the collapse of Germany. Hitler himself understands. In June 1942, before the Stalingrad offensive, he states, "If I don't get the oil of Maikop and Grozny, then I must liquidate the war." His Caucasus campaign fails to capture those oil fields, yet he continues fighting 3 more years. By 1945, German tank columns sit immobile, out of fuel, waiting for Soviet or American forces to capture them. Hitler delays Operation Citadel from May to July 1943. He wants more Panther tanks, wants better weapons, wants certainty. This delay gives the Soviets months to prepare. 300,000 civilians labored day and night building fortifications extending 300 kilometers back from the front. They lay over 1 million mines, 3,000 per kilometer of front. British intelligence cracks German codes and warns Stalin of the attack. Soviet spies provide exact details. Marshal Zhukov convinces Stalin to let the Germans exhaust themselves against these defenses before counterattacking. July 5, 1943. The largest tank battle in history begins. 6,000 tanks, 2 million troops, 4,000 aircraft engaged across the Kursk salient. German forces include 900,000 troops, with 2,700 tanks, 50 of the Wehrmacht's best divisions. They face 1.9 million Soviet defenders with 4,800 tanks. The Germans advance only 10 miles in the north, 30 miles in the south. Nowhere near the breakthrough needed. The new Panther tanks break down from rush development. By August 11th, only 9 of 156 remain operational. Tiger tanks suffer mechanical failures in the dust and heat. Soviet forces absorb horrendous casualties, 800,000 Soviet versus 200,000 to 400,000 German. But they achieve their objective. The German offensive stalls. Then on July 10th, the Allies invade Sicily. Hitler summons his commanders on July 12th, orders the Kursk offensive halted, sends forces to Italy instead. At the battle's height, he cancels Germany's last major Eastern Front offensive. From this moment, the Soviets hold permanent offensive superiority. Germany never again launches an operation on the scale of 1940 or 1941. The great Soviet offensives of 1944 and 1945 will push relentlessly westward, all the way to Berlin. June 6, 1944, 4 in the morning. 160,000 Allied troops begin landing along 50 miles of Normandy coastline, the largest amphibious invasion in history. German defenses should crush this invasion. They have 19 divisions in the region, including 6 powerful panzer divisions. Instead, a comedy of German errors enables Allied success. Hitler is sleeping. Allied landings begin around 4 a.m. Reports flood in. German commanders want to release the panzer reserves immediately, but only Hitler can authorize panzer movements, and no one dares wake him. Hitler sleeps until noon, a 12-hour delay in German response. By the time he wakes, Allies have established beachheads. Field Marshal Rommel is absent. He's returned to Germany for his wife's birthday, believing the weather too bad for invasion. Many other commanders are away from their posts. General Dahlmann of 7th Army is at a war game exercise when the real invasion occurs. General Falley races to his headquarters and is killed by American paratroopers along the way. But Hitler's strategic positioning proves most catastrophic. Rommel wanted panzer divisions positioned near the coast for immediate counterattack. Hitler refused. Most panzers remain near Paris. Meanwhile, 19 German divisions spend D-Day idle at Pas de Calais, 150 miles north. Operation Fortitude, the Allied deception campaign, has convinced Hitler that Normandy is a feint. The real attack will come at Calais. Even days later, Hitler suspects Calais, holds reserves there while Allies pour reinforcements into Normandy. Allied casualties on June 6 total approximately 10,000. Tragic, but far fewer than expected. German casualties range from 4,000 to 9,000. More significantly, the Western Front is now open. By June 30th, 850,000 Allied troops have landed. 148,000 vehicles. 570,000 tons of supplies. By August, all of northern France is liberated. Germany now fights major wars on 3 fronts, East, West, and Italy, with insufficient forces for any of them. The pathway to Germany lies open. The end is inevitable. Adolf Hitler, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Commander-in-Chief of the Army, former World War I corporal whose military experience consists of delivering messages in trenches. He's fighting the most complex mechanized war in human history, and he insists on approving every detail personally. At Stalingrad, Hitler maintains a street-by-street map before him, refuses withdrawal when encirclement becomes inevitable, orders the 6th Army to stand and fight when breakout is still possible. 250,000 troops lost. At Operation Barbarossa, Hitler overrules generals who want to drive on Moscow, diverts forces to Ukraine instead. The critical August 1941 delay probably cost Germany the war. At Kursk, Hitler delays the offensive from May to July, waiting for more Panthers, gives Soviets months to build impenetrable defenses, then cancels the offensive at its critical moment to send troops to Italy. On D-Day, Hitler's personal control over panzer reserves means no one can move them until he wakes at noon. A 12-hour delay enables Allied beachhead establishment. His no-retreat orders become death sentences. In World War I, Germany executes 48 soldiers for desertion. In World War II, the Wehrmacht executes at least 20,000 of its own soldiers for desertion, for unauthorized absence, for self-mutilation, for malicious gossip. Units that could survive to fight another day are instead destroyed in place, forbidden to conduct tactical withdrawals. General Heinz Guderian declares, "I would rather die first than pass on Hitler's halt orders." He's relieved of command on December 25, 1941. As Rommel tells Hitler to his face, "You demand our trust, but you do not trust us." Hitler's response to criticism: every general is either cowardly or stupid. July 1942. Germany launches its summer offensive in Russia with 266 divisions. Hitler imposes a ban on all non-military railway use while the offensive progresses. Yet throughout this period, 5,000 Jews per day travel by train to Treblinka. Another 5,000 travel twice weekly to Belzec. These are not supply trains supporting Stalingrad, not reinforcement trains rushing troops to Moscow. They're deportation trains, carrying human beings to extermination camps. Some months later, when Stalingrad stalls and the Sixth Army faces encirclement, trains that could bring supplies to German troops are diverted. Jews must reach the death camps on schedule. The scale of resource diversion is staggering. By war's end, the German government receives nearly $700 million in payment for deportation routes. 200,000 train employees participate in deportations. 10 to 20,000 directly operate these trains. Manpower desperately needed for military logistics. Railways critically needed for military supplies. All diverted to genocide. Beyond material costs, the Holocaust destroys potential allies. Ukrainians initially greet Germans as liberators from Soviet oppression. Within days, the illusion shatters. Nazi racial ideology takes over. Ukrainian nationalist leaders are arrested and sent to concentration camps. Instead of winning Ukrainian support against Stalin, Germany murders 1.5 million Ukrainian Jews, displaces 800,000, takes 2.2 million as slave laborers, destroys 700 cities and 28,000 villages. Ukraine loses 40% of its national wealth, 5 to 7 million people. Ukrainian resistance movements form. Germany must fight partisans while conducting military operations. Every soldier hunting partisans in Ukraine is a soldier not fighting at Kursk. Brutal occupation policies create determined resistance across Europe. The Polish Home Army becomes the largest resistance movement on the continent. 200,000 to 600,000 members by 1944. Polish railway workers sabotage German supply lines so effectively that historians estimate 1/8 of all rail transports to the Eastern Front are destroyed or significantly delayed. The Warsaw Uprising lasts 63 days in August and October 1944, ties down German forces during critical operations. Poland provides 43% of all intelligence reports from occupied Europe to British intelligence. The French resistance becomes equally effective. Railway workers sabotage telecommunications. On June 5, 1944, the day before D-Day, they activate Plan Violet, cut telephone lines, destroy underground cables, force Germans to use radios that British code breakers can intercept. During the Normandy campaign, the resistance blows up so many telephone lines that the Wehrmacht largely abandons the French phone system. Yugoslav partisans under Josip Tito become Europe's most effective anti-Axis resistance. 650,000 fighters by late 1944, 800,000 by April 1945. They eventually gain control of the entire country with Allied support. These movements collectively tie down troops Germany needs elsewhere, disrupt supply lines at critical moments, force Germany to maintain occupation forces that could reinforce military fronts. Every German soldier hunting partisans in Yugoslavia is a soldier not fighting at Normandy, not defending Berlin. December 16, 1944. Pre-dawn darkness. 200,000 German troops and 1,000 tanks surge through the Ardennes forest in Hitler's final offensive. He aims to split Allied forces, recapture Antwerp, force a negotiated peace in the West so Germany can focus on the Soviet threat. It's a desperate fantasy. Hitler has assembled Germany's last battle-worthy reserves for this attack, achieves complete surprise initially, creates a 50-mile bulge in Allied lines. But Americans hold key positions. At Bastogne, Germans surround the town and demand surrender. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe sends his famous one-word reply, "Nuts!" General Patton's Third Army executes a legendary relief, breaks the siege on December 26th. Then, on December 23rd, the weather clears. Allied air power devastates German columns. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs strafe tanks and supply trucks that sit immobile from fuel shortages. The largest and bloodiest battle fought by the United States in World War II costs America 75,000 to 83,000 casualties, 19,000 killed, 47,000 wounded, 23,000 missing or captured. German casualties reach 81,000 to 100,000. But the numbers miss the strategic significance. Germany has lost men and equipment it can never replace, committed its last reserves to a failed offensive. Winston Churchill calls it undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war. More importantly, while Hitler focuses final resources on the Western Front, the Red Army heavily outnumbers remaining German forces in the east. After the bulge fails in late January 1945, Nazi forces can only retreat. By late March, Allies cross the Rhine. Germany surrenders May 8, 1945, less than 4 months after its last offensive fails. Historians debate the moment when Germany's defeat became inevitable. Some point to December 1941. The failure to capture Moscow combined with Hitler's declaration of war on the United States. Germany now fights Britain, the Soviet Union, and America simultaneously. No realistic path to victory exists. Others choose February 1943. Stalingrad surrender. Hitler himself later blames this defeat for Germany's impending demise, the first irreversible defeat. Initiative permanently lost. Some argue for July 1943. Kursk, Germany's last offensive capability destroyed. Permanent Soviet superiority established. Or June 1944. D-Day. The two-front war becomes undeniable. Western Front opens while Eastern Front collapses. Historian Mark Harrison provides perhaps the best framework. He identifies two distinct periods. Period 1, from 1939 to early 1942, when military factors dominate. German forces achieve sweeping gains despite economic inferiority through superior strategy and fighting power. Period 2, from 1942 onward, when economic fundamentals reassert themselves. The war becomes one of attrition. Superior military qualities come to count for less than superior GDP and population numbers. The consensus view. The war becomes unwinnable in December 1941. Germany can no longer achieve even a stalemate by late 1942 after Stalingrad. Economic fundamentals make defeat mathematically certain. Germany produces 1,350 Tiger tanks during the entire war. Magnificent machines. 100mm frontal armor. The legendary 88mm gun, each one a masterpiece of engineering. The Soviet Union produces 84,000 T-34s, adequate armor, adequate gun, good speed, reasonable reliability, simple to maintain. 82% become total losses, but factories constantly replace them. When 5 T-34s surround every Tiger, technical superiority means nothing. The Americans follow a similar philosophy. The Sherman tank. Not exceptional, just adequate, reliable, easy to maintain, interchangeable parts. America produces 49,000 of them. The arithmetic devastates Germany. Soviet Union, 105,000 tanks. United States, 88,000. United Kingdom, 27,000. Germany, 49,000. Allied production approximately 4.5 to 1 advantage. Germany produces better individual tanks. The Allies produce an avalanche of adequate tanks that overwhelm German technical superiority through sheer numbers. The pattern extends to aircraft. Germany develops the Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. 870 kilometers per hour. Revolutionary. Germany produces 1,400 of them. Too late and too few to matter. Meanwhile, America produces 15,000 P-51D Mustangs. Not as fast, but with 2,600-kilometer range allowing bomber escort deep into Germany. By 1944, Mustangs dominate the skies. German Field Marshal Erhard Milch summarizes the situation. The British left us with deep and bleeding wounds, but the Americans stabbed us in the heart. The American avalanche of production proves unstoppable. By August 1944, Germany employs 7.6 million foreign forced workers, 20% of the German workforce. Concentration camp prisoners are 40% less productive than free German workers despite costing less. Malnutrition, abuse, disease, trauma. The explicit extermination through work policy means high turnover from death and illness. Absenteeism rates reach 20 to 25% by 1944. Sabotage attempts are frequent despite execution threats. At Monowitz, the Auschwitz III IG Farben complex, 30,000 prisoners die producing synthetic rubber and fuel. The human cost is staggering. The economic efficiency is dismal. By contrast, Allied workers are motivated, productive, skilled. Donald Douglas, founder of Douglas Aircraft, states it plainly. Here's proof that free men can outproduce slaves. In America, 8 million women enter the workforce. Gulf Shipbuilding grows from 240 employees in 1940 to 11,600 in 1943. These workers are well paid, motivated by patriotism and personal advancement. They achieve productivity levels Germany cannot match. Even in the Soviet Union, despite harsh conditions, workers are motivated by patriotic defense of homeland. The Railway Commissariat successfully evacuates 2,500 factories eastward in 1941. Millions of skilled workers relocated, one of history's greatest logistical achievements. All accomplished while supporting military operations and maintaining production. German military doctrine states explicitly, the logistical officer will not impede operations. Logistics officers are excluded from planning meetings. For Operation Barbarossa, German planners guarantee supplies for a 400-kilometer advance, promise supplies for 600 kilometers, maybe supplies for 800 kilometers. The actual distance to Moscow exceeds 1,000 kilometers. The railway gauge problem alone dooms Barbarossa logistics. Soviet railways use 5-foot gauge. German railways use standard European 4-foot 8.5-inch gauge. This requires converting the entire captured network, under combat conditions, while under partisan attack. On a typical day during the Stalingrad battle, 6th Army receives only 12 trains totaling 5,400 tons, insufficient for 330,000 troops fighting intensely. German trucks, Opel Blitz with 3.6-ton capacity, have 400-kilometer range. A 200-kilometer delivery trip consumes half the payload just for return fuel. By contrast, Soviet railway management is professional and effective. Military commanders are not allowed to interfere with operations. Trains run exactly on schedule. No overtaking permitted to maximize capacity. This enables the Soviets to evacuate 20% of industry and population eastward, while simultaneously supporting military operations. Germany never approaches this achievement. American production makes German logistics look even worse. America produces 800,000 trucks for Canada alone. More than Germany, Italy, and Japan build combined. The United States produces 2 million Army trucks total, all designed for mass production with interchangeable parts. From 1939 to 1945, Allied forces dropped 2.77 million tons of bombs on Europe, 1.4 million tons on Germany specifically. The campaign kills approximately 300,000 German civilians, wounds 780,000, leaves 7.5 million homeless. German production actually increases from 1942 to 1944 despite the bombing. Factories reconstitute in dispersed sites. The aircraft industry burrows underground, flees to forests. But the indirect impact proves decisive. From May 1944 to April 1945, Allied forces conduct focused attacks on oil targets, drop over 200,000 tons on oil infrastructure alone. German oil production falls from 918,000 tons per month to 319,000, a 65% decline. Simultaneously, railway bombing intensifies. By 1944, German railways are a barely functioning shambles. Armored columns are forced to drive to battlefronts because railways don't work. Coal can't reach synthetic oil plants despite nearby mines. The Wehrmacht can't receive fuel, ammunition, replacement parts, or reinforcements. Combined with oil shortage, this transportation collapse creates an economic death spiral. Recovery becomes impossible. The consensus among historians is stark. Germany almost certainly could not have achieved total victory given structural economic disadvantages. Allied GDP exceeds Germany's by factors of 2 to 5 throughout the war. The United States alone possesses an economy 2.1 times larger than Germany's before the war. And it doubles during the war. What if Germany hadn't invaded the Soviet Union? This requires Hitler not being Hitler. Lebensraum, living space in the East, is core Nazi ideology. Destroying Judeo-Bolshevism is Hitler's entire worldview. What if Germany had focused on Moscow first during Barbarossa? Even if Moscow fell, the USSR could continue fighting from beyond the Urals. Soviet territory is vast. Population is 167 million versus Germany's 68 million. Industrial capacity relocated beyond German reach. What if Germany hadn't declared war on America? Lend-Lease was already arming allies with billions before Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt was determined to support allies. U.S. entry was likely regardless. Better production priorities? Germany produces 1,350 Tigers instead of focusing on quantity. Delays synthetic fuel plant construction. Wastes resources on V-2 rockets and Me-262 jets that arrive too late. Better allocation might delay defeat 1 to 2 years, but it cannot overcome the fundamental 4 to 5 to 1 Allied production advantage. Historian Richard Overy explains it best. It was the fact that the Allies could afford to make mistakes, could absorb the cost of mistakes. That was critical. The Axis powers could not. Germany lacks industrial capacity, resource access, population, strategic depth. The geographic impossibility is equally insurmountable. Germany cannot defeat Britain. Protected by the Royal Air Force and Royal Navy. Cannot invade the United States. Protected by oceans. Cannot conquer the USSR. 21 million square kilometers allowing industry evacuation beyond German reach. Even at peak Germany in summer 1942, maximum territory controlled, Wehrmacht at maximum size, economic fundamentals mean long-term defeat is inevitable once quick victory fails. Nazi Germany's defeat results from cascading strategic failures that reinforce each other until recovery becomes impossible. The fundamental miscalculation. Challenging powers with combined GDP 3 to 5 times larger. Populations 10 times larger when including empires. Industrial capacity Germany can never match. Hitler believes racial superiority and willpower can overcome material disadvantage. He is catastrophically wrong. The decisive turning points paint a clear picture. Battle of Britain in 1940 keeps Britain in the war. Operation Barbarossa's failure in December 1941 opens an unwinnable Eastern Front. Hitler's declaration of war on America brings the world's greatest economy against Germany. Stalingrad in February 1943 marks the first irreversible defeat. Kursk in July 1943 destroys the last offensive capability. D-Day in June 1944 opens a true two-front war. By 1944, the mathematics are undeniable. Allies produce 184,000 tanks versus Germany's 39,000. Nearly 300,000 aircraft versus Germany's 114,000. Over 7,000 naval vessels versus Germany's 1,300. The United States alone builds more weapons than all Axis powers combined. While simultaneously supporting Britain and the USSR, oil production, the lifeblood of mechanized warfare, favors the United States alone 16 to 1 over all Axis powers combined. Germany creates its own nightmare. Fighting Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States simultaneously. The three greatest powers on Earth. Separated by oceans and thousands of miles. Possessing combined resources no nation could defeat. Hitler's ideology makes this inevitable. Lebensraum requires USSR invasion. Racial ideology prevents winning support in occupied territories. Refusal to admit defeat prolongs hopeless struggle. No retreat orders destroy entire armies. The economic strangulation tightens like a noose. Critical resource deficiencies. Oil production devastated. Transportation infrastructure bombed to shambles. Forced labor proving 40% less productive than free workers. Full war economy not achieved until 1943, 3 years behind the Allies. Even increased production under Speer can't reach the front lines. Germany mobilizes 42% of its male population, the highest percentage of any combatant, still insufficient. The Wehrmacht executes 20,000 of its own soldiers for desertion or defeatism, compared to 48 in all of World War I. 5.3 million German military personnel die. The Holocaust diverts railways to Treblinka while the Eastern Front starves for supplies. Most historians place inevitable defeat in December 1941. Moscow holds. Hitler declares war on America. A three-front war against enemies with combined resources Germany can never match. By late 1942, early 1943 after Stalingrad, even achieving stalemate becomes mathematically impossible. Economic fundamentals have reasserted themselves. The avalanche of production buries Germany. Historian Mark Harrison's conclusion stands. Superior military qualities come to count for less than superior GDP and population numbers. The greater Allied capacity for taking risks, absorbing mistakes, replacing losses, and accumulating overwhelming superiority turns the balance against the Axis. Germany fights brilliantly from 1939 to 1942, despite economic inferiority. But once the war becomes one of attrition, material facts decide the outcome. By May 8, 1945, when Germany surrenders unconditionally, the result is overdetermined. Multiple independent factors, any one potentially fatal, combine to ensure total defeat. In the frozen ruins of Stalingrad, in the burning factories of the Ruhr, in the grounded aircraft at empty airfields, in the immobilized tanks with empty fuel tanks. Hitler's thousand-year Reich lasts exactly 12 years. The mathematics were always against him. He just refused to believe it until the Red Army stood at the gates of Berlin and American forces occupied half of Germany. By then, it was far too late.